I will ask our secretary to please take roll call.
Sure. Directors Weed,
Here.
Gunther,
Here.
Huang,
Here.
Sethi,
Here.
and Akbari.
Here. Thank you. I actually forgot. Bob, did we want to start with any housekeeping, or are we good?
No, I think we can. I can do a quick housekeeping message because I do see that we have at least one member of the public here. So if you don't mind, I'll go ahead and do that.
Yes.
So first of all, can everybody hear me? Seeing nods. Good evening. On behalf of the Alameda County Water District Board of Directors, I would like to welcome the public's participation in this special meeting of the ACWD Board. My name is Robert Shaver. I serve as the General Manager of the district. Members of the public may participate in this special board meeting by either using the Zoom application or by telephone. And this evening, the workshop will focus primarily on the district's water main renewal program. And there will be pauses at appropriate times for members of the public to ask questions or to engage. If you're participating by Zoom, generally we ask that all participants mute their microphones unless speaking. And you may also be placed on mute by the district secretary. The district secretary will unmute participants at the appropriate times when the board is receiving comments. In Zoom, you can follow along with the presentation as they are presented to the board. And at any time, you may submit a question or raise your hand in the Zoom application if you're muted and you would like to address the board, or if you have questions. Again, though, we plan on pausing at the appropriate times to allow public to engage. If you're participating by telephone, you may download the presentation slides from the district's website at www.acwd.org. And we ask that you put your phone on mute to assure the best sound quality for everyone. We do record our board meetings and they are made available for public viewing on our website, usually a few days after the meeting. Again, thank you for attending.
Thank you, Mr. Shaver. With that, we'll move on to item 2. Director Huang, will you lead us in the salute to the flag, please?
My pleasure. If I could figure out how to unmute myself. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Director Huang. And we'll move on to item 3, public comments on matters on this notice of special meeting. And I see we have a hand raised in the Zoom app. Kelly A., the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. As far as the matters that are on this agenda, actually, if you look at the Brown Act, it says that I can talk on matters that are not on the agenda. So the phrasing on this item is exactly backwards. So I'll proceed. I have a quick little report on nationwide study on PFAS was published yesterday.
Mr. Abreu, if I may interrupt, I just would like to give opportunity to General Counsel because I think you're saying that we might have misrepresented the Brown Act, and I think he should have an opportunity to comment on that.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. General Manager. That's correct. So generally, Mr. Kelly, when it's a special board meeting, which is what this is, the Brown Act allows public comment on items that are on the special board meeting agenda. For the regular board meeting, it is more broadly worded, the Brown Act, and you can comment on anything within the subject matter jurisdiction of the agency. So the wording on the agenda is correct, and so we do limit public comment to matters that are on the agenda for this special board meeting.
Okay.
So that said, you know, if you can tie your comments to the district's water main renewal program, pipelines, water main replacement, those kind of issues, then I think that would be fine.
Okay. In that case, let's talk about the different materials that are listed on one of your slides. They have all these technical material engineering types of different pipelines. that are in use in the industry. And you'll notice that some areas, some jurisdictions are using something called ductile iron. And ACWD does not use any ductile iron. And what I heard from some other people in other agencies is that they use the ductile iron and they use it for a very good reason. And I'd like to, raise this issue of why aren't you using the ductile iron? And I'll get to that, get to their justifications for using it. They say that the ductile iron is being used in Japan, and Japan has a lot of earthquakes. As a matter of fact, it has about 4 times more earthquakes per capita or per day or per year than California does. And so they have a lot of experience. And apparently the story is that I heard is that the country of Japan, they're big fans of ductile iron. So I'm not saying that we should convert everything over to ductile iron, but I'm just wondering, maybe there's some certain spots right on top of an earthquake fault that we have, or whatever. There's probably some use for it in ACWD. I know that other agencies nearby are using it, and I'm wondering, why don't we use it anywhere? Thank you.
Hey, Mr. Abreu, this is your friend, Director Sethi. So let me just offer my input. It's not ductile iron, it's ductile steel. And I ran for the board on the issue of upgrading all of our large diameter pipelines across the Hayward Fault. And a lot of that is done with ductile steel that is stretchable steel. And you will find that in a lot of our enhancements over the last decade to our water infrastructure. So you're a friend in the community, but I'm sorry to contradict you here. We are well on the way to utilizing the most modern technology available. And we learned a lot from the Fukushima earthquake as well, when that occurred a dozen years ago. Thank you.
President Akbari, first I want to also add to Director Sethi's comments, but first I want to check with Mr. Stevenson and ask him, in this evening's presentation, does he plan on covering the district's choice of materials for water mains, or is it mostly about the renewal program?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Abreu, for the question. This is mostly about the water main renewal program, but the selection of materials and a discussion about what other agencies are using is included in the presentation. So this is part of the scope of the overall discussion this evening or this afternoon. And I would just quickly add, there are a multitude of different materials and pipe types out there. And as I think Mr. Abreu correctly points out, that Japan has widely used certain types of pipe systems, including special seismic joints. We have evaluated those. I would say nothing's off the table. We can talk some more about that when we get to that section. Yeah, the topic of main types and main systems and materials is certainly part of our discussion.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Stevenson. And we can dig deeper into this particular topic when we get to those points if needed.
Great. Thank you for the question. And thank you to Director Sethi, Mr. Stevenson, and Mr. Shaver for the response. Let me see if there are any other members of the public who wish to make a comment before we move on. Hearing none, I think we can close our public comments and we'll move on to item number 4. Item number 4 is our main renewal program workshop. This workshop will provide an overview of the district's main renewal program and will include the following topics: an overview of prior analyses of the condition of the water distribution system and recommended improvements, an overview of the process used to prioritize and program main renewal projects into the capital improvement program, a review of programmed and completed water main renewal projects, findings from a survey of Bay Area agencies and their main renewal programs, and a proposed approach towards further progress on the district's main renewal program. And with that, I will turn it over, I think, to Mr. Shaver or Mr. Stevenson.
I'd like to say a couple of things before turning it over to Mr. Stevenson. And number one, I think staff has put together a presentation that should take maybe a little longer than an hour, but I think the board will find it interesting and comprehensive. And I hope you enjoy it and find it informative. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Stevenson.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Shaver. Yeah, just a couple of quick remarks before we start stepping through the presentation itself. You know, as the board's aware, staff has been working hard at implementing the various projects under our main renewal program over the last few years. But it has been some time since we've provided an overview of the program, sort of taken a step back and shared the bigger picture. And we've learned a lot about our program and about advancements in the industry, including materials, over that time. So in addition to the things we've learned about the implementation of our own program, we've also been working with other agencies and sharing information and learning about the main replacement and renewal programs of other agencies. And we recently conducted a survey of other public and private agencies in the Bay Area and have findings to share from that survey. And those are helping to inform our own thinking about ways forward and ways to more optimize our own program. And we've also taken a look at our prior analyses and our prior planning work in the main renewal program and the projections that were done in the past that have helped to inform our program to date. And now that sort of hindsight is 2020 now, we can look back at those prior analyses and see where we hit the mark and where we want to conduct additional analyses and adjust as we move forward. So finally, you know, having reviewed all of these issues, we have a planned approach to continue to move the project or the program forward. And we want to share that with the board because we're in the budget process currently. We also wanted to provide a bit of a preview of what our program may look like in the capital improvement program going forward too. So this afternoon, we're not looking for any formal action by the board. However, any questions, concerns, or feedback that we should be considering we're certainly welcoming that type of input. So with that, I'd like to introduce Rekha Ipagunta, who is the district's Project Engineering Division Manager. And Rekha will help step us through these topics. And so Rekha, while you're sharing your screen, I will just also note for the board and for the public that the presentation slides that we'll show here this afternoon, they're posted on the district's website with the agenda for this workshop. Now, there's a lot of material in the presentation, and a lot of that is review, and it's details about projects that are currently underway that the board may already be familiar with. And so Ms. Ipagunta's plan is to only very briefly touch on those topics in order to focus more on the future of the program. But that said, we'd be very happy to go into any detail desired on any of the topics if there are questions from the board or from the public. So with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Ipagunta.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you all hear me okay? Good. Good afternoon, members of the board and members of the public. My name is Rekha Ipagunta. I'm the Project Engineering Manager. So we have a lot of information to go through this afternoon. So the information will be provided in multiple sections. The first section, I will go through the main renewal program objectives, very briefly touch on prior analysis and board presentations, and then walk through the distribution system analysis. After the first section, we'll pause for any questions or discussion, and then In section 2, I'll briefly go through the main renewal prioritization methodology, the project selection process, and project implementation. So I'll also touch on the program status. So far, a lot of information is provided in the slide deck, but I'll briefly go through the program status and then discuss the lessons learned so far in the implementation of this program. So in section 3, we'll share the findings of our industry research and our Bay Area agency survey. And section 4, I'll go through our revised or modified approach to our water main renewals, and then finally conclude with our planned next steps. So briefly on our main renewal program objectives, so we have about 900 miles of pipeline, out of which 70% of that is AC pipe. When I say AC pipe, on most of the slides, that means asbestos cement pipe. So majority of our distribution system uses AC pipe as a material, and some of that is in seismic setting. So in order to renew and replace 900 miles of pipeline, the core objective of the program is we need a proactive renewal model for replacing or renewing these water distribution mains. And the program would also focus on improving service reliability and seismic reliability. So additional objectives of the program to prevent unmanageable number of failures in the future, and also the prioritization of the program is based on the risk profile of the pipelines in our distribution system. Currently, we have an objective of $10 million to invest on pipeline renewals. So in the next few slides, I'll go through very briefly the previous analysis that was conducted and the recommendations made to the board. So back in 2008, district conducted seismic vulnerability and assessments that included all facilities, both production and distribution facilities operated by the district, but I'm only touching on the distribution system analysis and some of the key findings from that report. So the report identified some cost-effective approach to improving the stabilizing the system and ensuring critical customer service. So those were recommended in 2 phases. Phase 1 is complete. Most of the fault line crossings have been completed under phase 1 approach of this report. The project is complete now with multiple fault line crossings within the distribution system. And phase 2 actually focused on the backbone piping in different corridors of the system. And also the report identified the need for a long-term plan for these main renewal projects. And then following the seismic assessments, district also conducted asbestos cement pipe assessment in 2009. Exponent was contracted to complete the assessment. They have collected samples of our asbestos cement pipe within the distribution system and analyzed those samples and tested them. So the key findings from Exponent report was that one of the major reasons the analysis was conducted at that time was to find out the estimated life expectancy of asbestos cement pipe, and also understand what's the remaining useful life, and so that information will help us plan for our program. Some of the key findings from that report, so the pipe strength was still above the requirement for a new pipe per ASTM standards. Some degradation has occurred, but not a lot. And the main outcome from that report was that the estimated life expectancy was estimated to be 75 years for AC pipes. And the report also identified there are other factors that influence the condition and the leak rate of the pipe segments within the system. And the analysis identified or projected echo wave of failures over time if we do nothing with the existing pipes. And again, this report also identified a need for a comprehensive main renewal program. Taking those recommendations from the analysis, staff worked on putting together a main renewal program for the district back in 2011. staff conducted the analysis and then came up with 3 alternatives to establish a program for the district. Alternative 1 was reactive repairs, which is basically relying on the repairs and do nothing. And alternative 2 was on the other end of the spectrum, where full replacement of pipeline at the end of statistical life expectancy. Staff recommended a hybrid approach that's a combination of proactive replacements and reactive repairs. So based on the model that was recommended in 2011, the objective of the program is to invest $10 million per year on this program. And based on this model, all the AC pipe in the system will be replaced by 2090. And in 2014, staff went through the analysis and identified, established a main prioritization model for the district to identify the right candidates to focus on as part of the program. So as part of that evaluation, we have identified about 20 miles of pipeline that is considered high priority at that time, and then package them into projects. So with that background, I will go into the distribution system analysis. Again, this analysis is based on the recent information of our distribution system that connects again back to what was done 10 years ago. So this chart depicts the distribution system of our system. So we have about 2/3 of our system is AC pipe material. And the average age of the AC pipe material is over 50 years. And the designed life is anywhere between 80 to 105 years. So all AC pipes, the AC pipes represent majority of the pipe leaks in our distribution system. So out of 300 recent pipe failures between 2011 and 2020, 77% of those pipe leaks were on AC pipes. So, so the continued focus on AC pipe renewal is appropriate. So this is a distribution system, distribution of AC pipes within our system. So we currently have about 186 miles of AC pipes that are at least 60 years old. And the AC pipes last anywhere between 65 and 105 years. This is based on American Works Association buried no longer estimate based on West Coast AC pipelines. And as I mentioned, we have about 186 miles of AC pipe in the age group of 60+ years. So this chart is showing the pipelines within 2 age groups in 2 decades. So the pipes that are shown in green color are the pipes that are in 40 to 49 age group. And the pipes in the blue color are pipes aged in 50 to 59 age group. So as you can see, most of the pipe failures in the 40 to 49 are in certain locations within the distribution system. And similarly, the same pattern could be noticed for 50 to 59 age group pipes. So pipes near downstream portion of Alameda Creek are primarily part of 40 to 49 age group. And the leak rate was about 2 leaks per mile. Although the system-wide group average is lower than what we have noticed in that particular location. So although age is a factor, but what we have noticed from this is there are pipelines in certain locations that are younger, that are in 40 to 49 years, have registered more leaks than the pipes in the 50 to 59 age group. So age is not the only factor, it's only one factor. So there are other factors that play a part in the in leaking and breaking of pipelines. So those are the material of the pipe, and the geographical location, as I have indicated on some locations where we can see more pipeline leaks. And then the geologic setting, so the soil conditions of the pipe, soil conditions in which the pipe was installed also will play a role in that, and leak history and construction methods. So these are all other factors that would influence the condition of the pipe and the leaks of the pipe. So pipelines with a diameter less than 10 inches represent majority of the pipeline leaks across recent years. This is only showing the information from 2011 to 2020. So current focus on small diameter main renewal is appropriate. So this is a chart depicting the condition, the current condition of the pipeline. So the 0.6% of our entire distribution system is in poor condition. The way the poor, moderate, and good condition are categorized are based on the number of leaks in the system. If the leaks, the number of leaks on a particular segment are greater than 3, then the segment is categorized as poor condition. If the leaks are between 1 and 2, then that's considered moderate. If there are no leaks registered or recorded, then those pipeline segments were considered in good condition. So based on that evaluation, 92% of the pipelines have no leaks to date. This is another chart depicting the pipeline leaks over a period of time. So the blue dots that you see on this chart are the pipeline failures or pipeline leaks recorded between 1985 and 2010. And the red dots represent the most recent leaks in the last decade, 2011 through 2020. The black line, which shows the projected number of failures, that is based on exponent analysis that was conducted in 2009 on our AC pipeline system. So the takeaways from this slide, so the recent number of leaks, which are shown in red, are relatively consistent with our preceding historical data from 2005 to 2010. So they are very much inconsistent with what we have seen over the last from 2000 to 2005. And there are some outliers in this data. This is actually not related to main breaks. So this was at the time between 1995 and 2000 when district was replacing plastic service laterals into copper. Because of poor compaction, there were some saddle breaks at that time. So that was related to a construction issue in 2095-2000 timeframe. So those are not really the leaks associated with our main breaks. So if we take those outliers out, our actual leaks registered that we have noticed are consistent with our previous recorded leaks. So the echo wave of failures identified by exponent in the AC pipeline assessment, we have not seen those yet. One reason could be that these leaks, the elevated rate of leaks were incorporated or factored into the exponent analysis. That could be one reason why the number of leaks were projected to be higher than what we actually saw. So another takeaway from this chart is that the ACP life expectancy may be 10 or more years beyond the predicted remaining useful life from our original analysis from 2009. Just to remind everyone, the report estimated that the life expectancy of ACP was 75 years, and now based on this new information, likely the remaining useful life is 10 years more than what was predicted. Summarizing the observations from the data, as I mentioned, the average expected life of ACP maybe longer than what was previously predicted to be 75 years. Average age of AC pipe in the system is 52, and it's aging, and more pipes are enlarging into this age group. And we also have noticed that the expected life is impacted not just by age, but many other factors, such as the size of the main, the material, the location, the geographic location, the soil condition, the construction method that was implemented during the installation of the pipeline. So all these are factors for pipeline breaks. And then again, the exponent analysis was a snapshot in time. Usually these kind of analysis should be conducted every 5 to 10 years as we get closer to the remaining useful life. So a reevaluation is already planned in our CIP. And another takeaway from the data is 7% or 70 miles of our pipeline, of all our pipe segments, account for all the leaks in the system since 1977. With this,
Reka, are you willing to take some questions from the board right now?
this is perfect time for questions. We'll be moving into the next section. Yes, please.
So I respect all of the work that our engineering organization and other people went through here, but I'm going to offer you another perspective, if I may. You're looking at AWWA standards for the condition of pipe, amount of leakage, things that are associated with the useful life of AC pipe. And I'm only talking about AC pipe here. But what I gathered after I went through the presentation earlier is that we're not doing, in my opinion, a correct vulnerability assessment of our AC pipe. 2/3 of our district is in a liquefaction zone, and we're on the Hayward Fault. As I've mentioned in previous meetings, the periodicity of earthquakes going back a millennia are between 90 and 165 years. The average is 140 years. We are currently in year 153 since the great earthquake of 1868. So we're well past the average, and we're nearing the maximum that scientifically is recorded. And so I view the AC pipe, the almost 200 miles of AC pipe that you're assessing here, as very vulnerable to an earthquake, a major earthquake. And I think that we need to take that into account, because if you realize what the risk assessment is moving forward, then that becomes the predominant factor in the rate at which you replace that AC pipe that's out there. So I'm just going to offer that one perspective here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's a great observation. And as we go into the next section of the slides, we'll also touch on how the pipelines are selected, and seismic vulnerabilities is a factor in the selection of our pipelines. So we consider the risk profile and understand the pipelines that are close to fault lines will get a higher weightage on our risk model. So those are the ones that would get a higher ranking when we are looking at all the pipes in the system.
Thank you, Director Sethi and Reka. While we're taking a quick break for questions, I want to see if there are any other directors who have questions for Reka.
Yes, John Wade. Reka, on your leak data, does it make a distinction between leaks at the joints versus failure of the pipe itself?
So most of the leaks that we have documented so far, those were mostly at the joints. Some of them were at the joints, and actually some of these leaks were also because of tree roots creeping into the pipe, and those won't really happen at the joints. So it's a combination of the leaks happening at the joints and some other factors influencing the leaks, and in some other conditions where the leaks happen because of pipeline failures related to other utilities going underneath our existing pipes. So it's a multiple factors that are contributing to these leaks, and the locations are at different points. So that's not something that has been completely documented in this presentation.
I suggest that when we do look at that, may well find that it is the different technologies were used for the joints and the experience on this and conditions, and rather than the pipe itself being the failure point, that the joints become a something worth giving attention to in your analysis.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Do you have any additional questions, Director Reed?
I have a bunch of comments, but let us finish the report, and then I'll come back into the go on to the greater, longer list.
Okay.
So please go ahead. I don't want to interrupt you.
Any other directors have questions? If not, are there any members of the public who wish to ask a question at this point? Hearing none. Reka, I'll turn it back to you and we can continue.
Okay, thank you. So let's move on to the next section, which is our risk-based approach to prioritizing our main renewals. And again, I'll go through this very briefly. The board has seen this information in the past. If there are questions, I'll pause and answer those questions. So we go through the prioritization or ranking of our pipelines and the selection of the pipelines for appropriate renewals in a three-step process. So the first step is we take all the segments in our distribution system that are on our GIS and then rank them based on relative risk. So each segment of pipeline is evaluated for likelihood of failure, consequence of failure, and other seismic factors that include fault proximity, liquefaction, and landslide. So once all these factors are applied at different weightage, we have a list of ranked list of all the pipeline segments in our distribution system. And in second step, we run our hydraulic model to understand any capacity constraints within the system, and the pipelines that exhibit some sort of capacity constraints or low pressure issues or any other concerns would be identified and then added to our complete list of ranked pipeline segments. And then once we identify the top 1% of pipelines that are ranked based on likelihood of failure and consequence of failure and other factors, those are mapped on a plot, and then we look for potential projects by consolidating different pipe segments into projects. So once we have these projects, we'll take the top 10 or 15 projects and then have an interdepartmental meeting and receive interdepartmental feedback and apply our institutional knowledge, and then identify top projects that we should be focusing on, and we'll incorporate that into our CIP process. So that's pretty much the selection of the pipelines and identifying the right projects to focus on. And then once the right projects are identified, we'll go through the detailed design, permitting, bidding, and construction, just like any other CIP project. So we also have a number of tools in our toolbox for renewal of these mains. Some of them are identified here. Slip lining an existing main is one option, or we can replace in the same trench or replace in a separate trench, and also cured in place lining is another option. So once the pipelines are selected, we'll evaluate the needs of those pipelines and then apply the right tool for replacement or renewal. So the next few slides focus on the implementation status. I'll quickly go through the projects that were completed and that are currently in progress. The board has seen this information a few times before, so I will be briefly touching on some of these projects. But feel free to stop me if you have any questions. So far, we have completed 7 projects since we initiated this main renewal program. And currently we have 2 projects in construction. One is a seismic improvement project and one is a small diameter main renewal. And we do have several projects in design. So this is a long list of completed projects. The key takeaway here is we have completed about 5.5 miles of pipeline so far. And this is Alvarado Niles seismic improvement project. Phase 1 is currently in construction. The board is very well aware of the project that is currently in construction, and we also have a second phase of the project that is currently in design. Phase 1 is on the west side of 880, so on Smith Road, and Alvarado Niles is the one that is currently in construction. It's 1.7 miles of pipeline. This includes not just the main trunk main installation, it also includes services, fire hydrants, and a complete renewal of our water system in that area, including installation of cathodic protection system. And also we have about 21 connections that we'll be making to our existing water system. So this is a $11.3 million construction contract. 99% of the pipeline is in ground, and we have about 50% of the pipeline is already in service. The project is anticipated to be complete by end of May 2021. This is another project that is in construction right now. This is a small diameter main renewal project in Newark, in a residential area on Concord Street and Sousa Street. This is about 1 mile of pipeline renewal of 8-inch PVC. And this is again includes installation of the main as well as service laterals, fire hydrants, and valves and appurtenances. The project was awarded in May 2020, and this is a $3.2 million contract. 50% of the pipeline is in ground. We encountered some unforeseen conditions during construction. The project is anticipated to resume construction next week, and it's expected to be complete by June 2021. So we do have several projects in design at this point. I'll briefly go through this. So Driscoll project, and the board has seen this project or heard about this project several times. This is again a seismic improvement of our water main on Driscoll Road. And this has several utility conflicts and permitting challenges associated with that. The project is anticipated to go into construction in summer 2021. And Alvarado Niles phase 2. Phase 1 is the one that is currently in construction. We also have phase 2 currently in design. This has some special consideration in addition to what we have in phase 1, which includes a creek crossing and a railroad crossing. The construction estimate of this project is going to be slightly higher than phase 1. It's estimated to be $17 million construction project, and the schedule for construction in 22-23. And other project that's currently in design, about 65% design complete. This is Central Newark, Thornton Avenue main replacement. This is phase 1 of the project, and phase 2 is included in our CIP. And we also have a small diameter main renewal project that includes multiple pipeline segments in the 3 cities. Currently, the project segments in city of Fremont that add up to about 3 miles of pipeline are currently on hold because of certain requirements from the city of Fremont related to removing the pipes from the ground after removing from service. So we have been in discussions with the city. Once we resolve those permitting requirements related to AC pipe removal, we'll resume the design on the City of Fremont pipe segments. However, Newark and Union City pipe segments are continuing, and the design is currently in the 65% design. And we also have additional projects that we are collaborating with City of Newark on one of the couple of small diameter pipeline segments. So with that, I'd like to touch on what we have learned so far in the implementation of this program.
Reka, can I just jump in and see if there's any questions?
Yes, of course.
Are there any directors who have questions?
I'd just like to make a quick comment. Living as close as I do to the Alvarado pipeline, we have dodged a huge bullet because of the school closures. However, the schools are most likely going to open back up someday. I see Fremont is looking to not do it till this fall. But looking at the projects, we're going to have Driscoll and most likely Alvarado Niles in process at the same time. And there was at least at one point during this project where I was cycling in a traffic light for 3 times on Alvarado Boulevard at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. That's with no schools at all in attendance. So when we go about this, and we start these 2 projects concurrent, there's going to be some significant traffic issues. The Alvarado Niles pipeline phase 2, phase 1 was Kitayama and Chavez. Phase 2 is Logan and what's the school over there? The other junior high. So it's going to be a very interesting situation, and we need to be really ready for traffic concerns, particularly if we try to do these during COVID with schools back in session.
Thank you, Director Gunther, for that comment. And I know Director Gunther has brought that up during engineering committee before as well. So I don't know, Reka, if you wanted to comment on that, or if there's a later slide that addresses that, we can move on.
Yeah, certainly we got lucky on phase 1 with schools. Originally, we planned to coordinate with the school district and have a plan in place. But that was that helped us with the project with this condition where the schools are closed. And for Driscoll pipeline and phase 2 is still in design for Alvarado Niles. For Driscoll project, we already started our communication with Unified School District, the junior high school staff, and also on the Union City Unified School District. So this is something that we are thinking as we are designing these projects. And yes, there will be impact to traffic, and yes, there will be impact to the schools. The plan is to at least install the pipe segments right in front of the school during summer. So it has to work. We have to work out the timing on those. Currently, the plan is to go with the construction of those pipeline segments right in front of the school, impacting the school traffic in summer. So that would minimize the impact.
Yeah, and I would just add to that too. Thank you, Reka, that you're absolutely right that traffic is always going to be an issue, particularly for these larger mains, which tend to run down these heavily trafficked corridors. And those are the mains that take longer to work on. They take more time. Things go at a slower pace. And folks there is a great deal of disruption. And you're right, we absolutely dodged a bullet with Alvarado Niles phase 1. But even then, there were very significant traffic issues on Alvarado Niles, and that it'll be somewhat more intense in phase 2 because there will be more openings and so forth. And Driscoll, it will be very much the same. We dodged a bullet on Driscoll too, given the work that we had to do, the preliminary work needed to do potholing and site surveys and things like that. And we were able to do that during the COVID shutdown. So yes, traffic will be an issue. Disruption to the community will always be an issue with this program, both traffic and other disruptions, noise, dust, sometimes water service outages, as short as we can keep them. And so we try and balance cost and trying to minimize impacts on customers. So we do things like weekend work when we can. We do things like work over the summer, like Ms. Ipagunta pointed out. We do work at night when we can, in non-residential areas in particular. But those add cost premium. So we try and strike the right balance, but there, no matter what we do, there will always be challenges. In the case of both of these occurring at the same time, if we're fortunate that the schedules hold, the good news is that those two corridors are separated by quite a distance, north and south. So hopefully that helps to minimize or mitigate the impact.
I do appreciate what staff has done and their concerns, and I'm sure they're aware and concerned, and hopefully the traffic jams won't back up to each other. But I think we're going to be okay. It's worth the cost. I mean, it really is to get these fixed, and we have to do it. So just keep it up and keep up the good work.
Thank you, Director Gunther. I actually had one question on slide 32, which was Suze Avenue and Concord Street. I believe you made a comment that sounded like maybe the project ran into some issues and was on hold currently and will be picked up again next week. Can you just expand on what issues we ran into and what lessons we learned to try and avoid that situation next time?
Yes, actually, this is sometime late January. We have encountered groundwater and actually potholing that was done during design, and also the potholing that was done before starting construction by the contractor didn't reveal that information, because at that time the design was based on a shallow depth pipeline, which is less than 5 feet deep. So groundwater was not an issue during design, or was not identified as an issue during design or when we started construction. But because of some unforeseen conflicts, pipe conflicts with other utilities, we had to redesign certain segments on the fly. So the redesign required us to go deeper than 5 feet, the originally anticipated depth. So now we had to go about 7 feet deep, and that's when the contractors encountered groundwater issues. So the project was stopped at that time for those pipeline segments. And this required a dewatering plan, and the plan had to be approved. We had to put a plan together, and then the plan had to be taken to Union Sanitary District and then receive appropriate approvals. And they required additional treatment, like adding containers that act as sedimentation basins, and then adding back filters to treat, to make sure the turbidity levels are within the range that the wastewater treatment plant could take. So the treatment aspect of the dewatering, the groundwater, and also the discharge issues took us a while to get the right permits from Union Sanitary District, and also for the contractor to put the complete plan together and secure those additional containers for treatment and back filters. So that was the main reason the project was delayed. And for the last few weeks, that's what the contractor and staff has been working on to get the right permits and get the dewatering plan in place. We are anticipating the permit from USD tomorrow, and hoping that the construction will resume next week.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Director Sethi here.
Yes.
So back to the slide that you were on with costs there. think it was slide 30, yeah, 38. There we go. So I just want to offer a little bit of feedback here. I appreciate all the work that staff is doing, all the continuing work that we've done on projects, but I just want to offer a little bit of a retrospective here. If we go back a dozen years, we were looking at the unit costs that you mentioned here, and now it's tripled from that level. We, in my opinion, arbitrarily chose a number as a board based on input from staff that we were going to try to complete $10 million a year of pipeline renewal, which amounted to 5 to 10 miles of pipeline every year. But that goes back a decade ago. Now we're dealing with a different cost metric in our universe. And I don't know whether we're being realistic about the future financing costs of the projects that we have in our pipeline. Sorry, pardon the pun there. And I'm also going to be a little bit critical of staff here because we as directors are responsible for setting the rates for our customers. And we dramatically increased our rates 4 years ago in anticipation of doing a lot of main renewal work. And what has happened is that if you look at our reserves, we're building up tens of millions of dollars in reserves because we're not getting sufficient work done. And I feel like I lose credibility with the public when I have to go in front of crowds that are hostile and say, we need the money to do this work, and then it doesn't get done. And I want to get that message very clearly across to our engineering team and our management team. That's why we're piling up tens of millions of dollars in our reserves, because the work didn't get done, period. And I'm not sure, I'm glad Mr. Wunderlich is, I see him in on the meeting here. The one thing that's missing from this whole analysis is what the future obligations of the district are going to be to do a finite number of miles per year moving forward in our forecast. Number two, how do we finance it? We know we have lots of reserves to eat up right now, but what about the future years? And so we're looking at close to $1 billion of work from what I see going out. And in the past, we've financed our waterworks with bonds where we had to use up 85% of the money within 3 years. I would like us to take a look at some other financing mechanisms here. Is it possible to do a 30-year bond for $1 billion that covers a lot of the work that we're planning on doing? Look at if we're going to do 0.5% per year or 1%, I would ask you to try and tax yourself. Try to do 2% a year and look at what the financing costs would be on that. So you have a 50-year upgrade program, or even 3% per year, and contract out a lot of the work. And look at what the financing costs would be on that. That's what I really want to look at as a board member. Take 0.5%, 1%, 1.5%, 2%. Give us the different cost analyses that tie back into all of this engineering work that needs to be done. And lastly, I can't overemphasize it. We got to get the work done. We need to figure out, do we need more engineering help? Do we contract out help? but we need to speed things up. And we cannot be piling up tens of millions of dollars of our ratepayer money and not getting the work done that was promised 4 or 5, even 10 years ago. So I'll get off my soapbox right now.
Director Sethi, if I could just chime in, I appreciate your soapbox. And that's really one of the reasons why we wanted to circle back with the board with this information, because one of the things we want to make sure that we're doing is that we're not sitting on information that the board needs to know about, say, the costs of the program and what staff is thinking in the way of accelerating the program and moving it forward. Certainly the costs are much different than they were 13 years ago. And so that's one of the things we want to be very upfront about. The other thing you mentioned in terms of accelerating the program, and that's really a key objective of what staff is working to do. Yes, there are big dollars involved, and one of the things we've been working on is trying to show in the CIP what those dollars will translate to in the future. So we're trying to be responsible and proactive from that standpoint. This presentation, this information is designed to kind of set that background so that we're not relying on those same expectations that we had in mind, many years ago, that rather we're making a more realistic assessment of what the cost of the program is and then what our future would look like. In terms of ramping up, you'll see that's our, I'm sure you have seen that is our approach. We do intend to dedicate additional resources to this over time. There will be obviously costs of that. We want to ensure that the CIP reflects that. And we also know that we need to, or at least our intent is to do that in a responsible way that's matching that increase in production of the program to all of the factors involved, including the maximizing the economic life of the existing system. So those are some issues that we'll touch on as we move a little bit more forward, but we definitely hear your sentiment there and do not disagree.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Adding on to that, in addition to economic challenges, this is to set the stage for what the economic challenges are and how do we reset the program. We're also thinking about how do we achieve this accelerated program or ramp up, how do we do that? So that's something that we are also thinking about, maybe having a dedicated group of engineers. Something has to change to make progress on this project and be successful. Thanks for your input on that. And just summarizing the challenges, this would be a good connection to why some of these projects take longer. So far, we have been focusing on some large diameter projects in seismic setting and with some complex environmental issues. So those projects take a lot of time, a lot of resources. And if you observe over the last 6-7 years, majority of our projects are for some of these large mains. I think there is a need to emphasize that we also need to focus on small diameter mains to ensure we're making the right progress on the program. And we also had some logistical issues related to the record drawings of the utilities. And continuity in staffing has been a challenge. In the last 9 years, we have lost 13 people in engineering, project engineering. So some of these issues are contributing to that. And then permitting issues, we have encountered several delays in receiving encroachment permits on the projects that are in design or the ones that we have been working with the cities for several months or years in some cases. And a lot of these pipelines are in the jurisdiction of SFPUC, Caltrans. So there are other agreements that are necessary to go through some of those right-of-way issues. And as I mentioned before, when we are talking about the main renewals, we are not really just focusing on the water mains, the trunk mains. We are replacing the entire system that includes our fire services, So there are additional jurisdiction requirements related to fire hydrants. So these are some of the issues that we are encountering. And then as you mentioned, this is also impacting our cost of construction. The costs have went up 3 times over the last 12 years, and the pothole costs have also gone up. And this is really important these days because of unavailability of accurate record drawings. So there is, it's important to understand some of the major conflicts when we are doing the design. And potholing is an important aspect of the design. And we have seen that those costs have also gone up. And then there were some additional lessons learned from the recent construction jobs, like dewatering costs related to groundwater, and then soils disposal in some areas where the pipeline construction happening near the gas stations. There are issues related to the soils, constituents in the soils, and the transportation of the soils has raised the cost of construction. So that's in a summary, the challenges that we have been facing in the implementation of this program. And then translating that to lessons learned, some of the key lessons learned from this implementation is we have to continue focusing on small diameter projects, not just large diameter seismic improvements. That's the only way to get more pipe renewed per dollar. And we also have to continue our early coordination with the cities and understanding their paving requirements, standards, and other permit requirements. We also have to look at expanding our renewal toolbox rather than going with pure replacement or structural liner. There are other innovative technologies that are in investigation. So we'll be on the lookout for industry best practices and innovation that is happening in the main renewal side, and focus on other pipe materials as well that would provide us longevity and lower our installed cost. Last but not the least, we also have to focus on alternative delivery approaches, such as design build, job order contracting, master contracting, and continue to collaborate with our with the cities and integrate our pipe renewal projects with the street improvement projects that are part of their capital improvement program. So we have started quarterly discussions with the cities to understand their plan for the next 2 years, 5 years, and see if there is a way to integrate our program with the street improvement projects.
Reka, if I might insert a thought here. Because, you know, I've said this before, I'm a real advocate of going to design build or contracting out work on a master contracting agreement. As you very well know, it takes time for an outside firm to come up to speed with everything that our water district is doing, and then to understand all of the challenges that they have to overcome with the different cities that are involved and other utilities. And so I very much would favor looking at like a long-term agreement, 10 years, so that you give an assurance to the master contractor that they're going to have this amount of, you know, foreseeable revenue and stability coming in from ACWD, so that they can make the proper investment in their own hiring, their own project management assets that they have, so that they can do not just an adequate job for ACWD, but a superior job for our district and our customers. And so that takes a lot of foresight to try and negotiate with someone for a long-term relationship with our district. That this is not, you know, a one for this year, you might get something next year, we'll see about the next year. You need to form a collaborative, long-term relationship so that we get best value for the money and they're making an assured reasonable profit too.
Agreed. That's something that staff is reviewing at this time, and as we go into the next section, that's the pilot approach that we are looking at would incorporate some of these approaches in our main renewal program approach going forward. Thank you for that feedback.
Could I raise a couple issues here that we can, before we go into the next section, at least one? That you incorporate a contingency planning and response element to the program that you have. The ability to isolate various segments of the system with valves. The ability to identify places to jump sections of the community system so you can keep portions of it in operation. We had a preliminary informal presentation at the Water Quality Report that we can expect 1,200 breaks, and it will take anywhere from 30 days to 8 months to recover from that, based on our approach and how much we're going to use internally. But a major part of that problem is having the materials in hand. So if you're going to go into this major project, possibly you want to put the funding for materials and stockpile them as a preliminary step, so that if we did have a major contingency, then many of the materials would be in hand for us to be able to utilize and have some of the equipment necessary that would be necessary to augment this program in place. On the design itself, making sure we know the depth of the pipes. There's GIS work being done and abilities that can give you three-dimensional GIS feed on information, and having that knowledge is turning out to be important. You can even wear a hood and visualize where the pipes are underground based on the GIS system when you walk around. Extraordinary technology. So
if I can build on John's earlier comment here. John, do you mind me?
No, please, on this one.
So on Director Weed's first comment, I passed along to our general manager and our board president some of the details on the $2 trillion infrastructure bill going through Congress right now. 50 billion of that is for disaster resilience for communities. 50 billion. And the USGS says we are the most vulnerable earthquake spot in the country right now. So can you imagine if you're building on what Director Weed is saying right now in terms of preparatory work for disaster resilience? There's going to be money available for us if we think strategically and seriously and dive into what's passing through Congress in the next few weeks here.
Thank you. In your presentation, I note that we did not discuss the particular vulnerabilities of AC pipe, and that the smaller diameters are more vulnerable and have a shorter lifespan than the larger pipes because of the way that they deteriorate over time. Ironically, when we did the main crossings based on it being vulnerable AC pipe, those were the larger and therefore are least vulnerable of the AC pipes in our system. But they were in the most vulnerable locations. So I encourage you to do that. There is technology being developed on the type of pipe work. I remember 10 years ago going to an AWWA conference where they had robots would go into the pipes and be able to spray a liner. They could concentrate on the joints from the interior for repair, even on small diameter. And they could have a little robot that would go in to tell you where the connections were when they put in a new liner in the pipe, so that when they made the new connections to the outside, they could make that connection somewhat remotely without having to do as much major excavation. So there are some new technology coming along in the way of replacement of pipes and putting in liners. I'm glad to see there. And some of those liners even spray in. So I noted on the SBA repair work being done now, the concentration is on the joints. That's where I think you'll find when you go back and revisit your data and experiences, the vast majority of our breaks and leaks are at joints. Thank you.
Yeah, and Director Weed, I think you're right that many of the leaks and failures are at the joints. Oftentimes there's a rubber gasket. This is a place where the pipes will move relative to one another. The failure modes of ACP are many actually, but yes, at the joints, at the gaskets, but also degradation of the material, the pipe wall itself, the loss of calcium over time. Depending on the soil conditions is really what we see from our prior analysis and also from pipes that we take out of the ground. The smaller diameter pipes tend to be more vulnerable because they have thinner pipe walls, right? By design, the dimension ratio is different than the larger pipe. So simply structurally, the larger pipe has a heavier wall, more calcium, takes much longer for the pipe wall to degrade. We have used the liner systems in the past. We had a very successful two pipes that we lined somewhat recently with what Reka is showing here as cured in place CIPP structural liners. These weren't sprayed in, these were fabric materials that are pulled in through the pipe and then essentially inflated and cured with an epoxy resin. That worked very well. We did use the little robot to go in there and clean the pipe in advance and pull the new material through, and then also locate all the service connections. That system works well, and certainly in some scenarios, and that's why it's in our toolbox. It doesn't work well in many other scenarios, and we can go into more detail, but that's definitely one of the options that we want to continue to apply where it's appropriate.
Okay. And finally, I'm staying on the theme of the contingency response, is retaining the existing systems where possible, where they can be used for fire flows and irrigation and sanitary flows. We've got to have a major investment. We're going to, rather than remove a service, you take it out of service in place, and therefore you have the alternatives. And if you need, with the ability in the future, if need be, to rehabilitate those pipes for contingency duplicate services. Thank you.
Ed, you just mentioned that the liners, that there's particular constraints to where the liners can be used. Can you just briefly comment on the constraints on where we could actually make use of those liners? And from a cost perspective, if I recall correctly, we use the liners for the renewal at the corner of, I think it was Fremont and Grimmer. Is that correct? Was that Fremont and Grimmer where we did the liner?
That was actually at Washington and Paseo.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. So we did a couple of long segments of pipe in those areas. So some of the constraints, there's lots of advantages, and we can talk about those, but some of the constraints, it's great for ACP, right? The main material we're focusing on so far in this discussion, but it's not that great for steel and other types of materials that you'd be actually welding on for things like flanges and service connections and weldolets and things like that, because you're essentially lining this steel pipe with a plastic, right? And so it's not great if you need to be able to weld onto that pipe, which is very common for pipe materials other than say PVC or ACP. So a constraint is the host pipe material. It can be done, it just definitely changes the way you would do maintenance and other work on the pipe. Other considerations include the big advantage of these sorts of liners is if you can run a long length of a liner through a pipe and simply reconnect services that are already existing, it's great. But once you have to start digging up the entire street anyway to replace adjacent service lines and hydrant laterals and branch connections and replace valves and do lots of these other things, that we are doing currently as part of our water, we call it a water main renewal program. It's a water system renewal program. We are changing everything. And so the value of a liner starts to decline if you have lots of service connections that you need to replace anyway, lots of branch connections, lots of air valves, lots of hydrants, because at that point you're digging up the entire street anyway, right? And the value of a liner is to minimize the amount of digging you're doing. And so that's where the economics start to tail off when you have high density of service connections and other connections and appurtenances on the pipe. So there's some of the factors that come into play in terms of material selection, but also, you know, renewal system selection.
Would the pipe diameter factor in at all? Do they have kind of a minimum pipe diameter that they need to run the robot through to actually pull the liner?
Pipe diameter is definitely an issue. Generally, there's a wide range of these sorts of cured in place structural liners, which is what we're really talking about. However, the liner itself has a thickness. And so once you line the pipe, you will have slightly less hydraulic capacity than you had before. In many cases, that's okay. Sometimes that is a constraint, and that's not good. We'll look at that with hydraulic modeling to ensure that we're not going to do something that constrains our system, but it does not increase hydraulic capacity. It will reduce it. In terms of constraints, like there is equipment that you put in the pipe in order to install the liner and to do the curing process and so forth. But the types of pipes that we have can easily accommodate that equipment. So there are constraints too in terms of maximum diameter. These liners are only available up to certain pipe sizes, but those are improving year over year. And so the diameters that you can line are getting larger and larger, which is a good sign for us in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Ed, could I do a process check here and look at how much time to finish this presentation? We have a closed door session too.
Yeah. Yeah, we have some chunky stuff coming up. So what we'll try and do is step quickly through the survey, which is the next section. You've had an opportunity to take a look at the material. You'll quickly see the findings that we have here. And then we'd like to take a look at our overall objectives. And that will start on slide 50. So Reka, do you mind stepping quickly through the next section?
Yes, I'll do that. I know we have about 15 or 14 slides. I'll go through the survey information real quick and then get to our approach. So as I mentioned before, we have conducted a survey, sent our survey to 8 utilities that included a combination of utilities, special districts, private water utilities in Bay Area. So, and we also have conducted follow-up discussions with those utilities who responded to our survey. And I'll quickly go through our findings here, some of the key findings. As you see on this slide, ACWD is neither too big nor too small, not a very complex system, but somewhere in the middle, bigger than utilities or municipalities and moderate size compared to other special districts. And then this is a slide showing the current renewal rate by other utilities. Private utility that responded to the survey, they are maintaining 1% replacement rate. But if you look at the agencies and municipalities, most of the Bay Area utilities are under 0.5%. Just for the benefit of the public, when I say 1% replacement rate, it means that it takes 100 years to replace the entire system. And when I say 0.5%, it takes 200 years. So it goes in the same proportion. And then this is another piece of information that we gathered in terms of what pipe material other utilities are using. And we found out that many utilities are using duct line, PVC, HDPE. These are the standard materials for small diameter pipelines. Whereas when it comes to large diameter pipelines, most utilities are again relying on duct line, PVC, HDPE. And steel is a material for some utilities. What we have found out is that's generally used for large transmission mains. Otherwise, PVC and HDPE, many utilities have been successful in using duct line PVC HDPE for large distribution mains. And we also surveyed on the project delivery methods. 6 utilities that we have surveyed are utilizing a traditional design bid build approach, and similar to what ACWD is doing. There is 1 utility that's using their own construction crews. And then there is 1 utility that is also using design build approach. And another utility is piloting a design build approach just for the emergency replacements, with a plan to go into design build approach for future replacements or renewals. And then there's a question on pipeline renewals or rehabilitation methods that other utilities are using. 2 of the utilities responded that they are using some sort of pipe rehab methods like CIPP lining, structural lining, or pipe bursting is not really an option for AC pipes, but other utilities, when they have other pipe material, successfully use pipe bursting and slip lining if capacity is not a constraint. 1 of the 2 utilities that responded that they have pipe rehab method significantly been using the renewal method was they are wholesalers, so they have majority of their pipelines are transmission mains with the average size 48 or 90-inch pipe. So in those cases, it makes total sense to heavily rely on rehab methods. So summary of the findings, the average replacement rate of the Bay Area agencies, that includes both municipalities and special districts, it's in the range of 0.25%. And all the utilities are targeting to go up to 1%, but none of them are really achieving at that rate. Currently achieving less than 0.5%, and all the utilities that we spoke to are planning to ramp up over time. So in terms of contracting approaches, as I mentioned, master contracting has successfully been used by several utilities, and in-house construction crews is also something that we found has been successful. And all agencies are experiencing similar challenges related to implementation of their programs, accuracy of record drawings for utilities. This is a common theme that we have identified in paving restoration requirements as part of encroachment permits. Most of the utilities we spoke to are encountering these issues. An increase in material and construction cost, we are not the only ones facing this. And then summarizing that, most utilities are exploring other pipe materials and considering PVC, HDPE for large diameter pipe renewals.
Hey, Rekha, this is Paul. I just want to emphasize this again. It's really good and valuable information to benchmark against other agencies, public and private. Thank you very much for the information. But I don't want us to set our benchmarks necessarily with what the average is for other agencies. I really would like to push the boundaries here and ask ourselves some questions. What does it take to get to 1% replacement rate, 1.5%, 2%, even 3%? And then have our finance team look at what it costs us to do that. And then that feeds back into our rates discussions that we're going to have later this year and things like that, so that we have a comprehensive understanding of what we're actually able to achieve with a certain amount of funding in place. And so I want to challenge the district. I really want to impress this upon our team. Let's look at this as a challenge here. If we can get to a 50-year replacement or a 30-year replacement on our system, put the challenge to our team and let's see what they're capable of. Let's look at the numbers, okay?
We do have some information that we are proposing as part of our approach going forward to water main renewals. Let's see if that answers your question here. And again, this approach we're not using the survey as the benchmark survey as direction for us to take this program forward. It's just understanding where other utilities are and what challenges they're facing, and if there are any industry best practices that we can learn from them. So that was the main intent of the survey, and we did learn a lot. In addition to these Bay Area agency surveys, we also reviewed the nationwide reports, the recent America's Infrastructure Report Card released in 2021 by American Society of Civil Engineers. The findings from the nationwide report and findings from Bay Area survey agencies, they are all in line with what we have been thinking, and we formulated the approach based on the needs of the district.
Yeah, well, we know everybody is behind schedule. Let's see if we can become the standard bearer for the industry in showing how it's done right.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Director Sethi. And you'll see that our approach involves reassessing this program. I understand that you're seeing a need for additional urgency. We do always want to consider the remaining economic life in the current system and try and balance that. But because right now our objectives have been based upon balancing that economic objective. If there are other objectives, then it's helpful for us to understand. But you'll see our approach and how we're essentially doing a bit of adaptive management as we go over time.
Okay. John Weed, if I might follow up on, particularly on Dr. Sethi's comments. I thought we'd be here 12 years ago, and now we're coming back to it after a 10 to 12 year hiatus. And that was caused by several things. One is an incredibly unstable rate structure. Following in the early 2013 drought, 12, we went 3 years where we're leveraged down and we had a 20% conservation. We had a $60 million shortfall in our projected revenues. We had to cover that. That put this project on hold, along with a number of other projects. We couldn't do anything for that 3-year period of time. Balance, when you get your fixed rates and fixed income and fixed cost and in alignment, you can plan and program projects. It would have been an $80 million shortfall, but for the fact that we raised our fixed cost just before this. The next is the timing required to get borrowed money. We were given false information when we did the crossings that we had to complete 85% of the project in 3 years. Pat Miyake in particular can remember the confusion that Mr. John Wang, I believe, of Sutro, and why we don't hire Sutro, didn't ask Sutro to come back and bid on any future bond projects. The hedge funds rules were presented to the board and our staff, and we were operating under some false information. In recent years, we have had good fortune. We've been selling extra water, and we're leveraged about 400%. And for the last 2 years, we put about $50 million into savings because our cost of water is about less than $500 an acre foot, and we're selling it for $2,000, and we're selling more water than we had planned. We've got this up and down cycle. So our fear is if you go into a drought, there won't be any money there. You cannot do multi-year programming with our current rate structure and have any confidence that you'll have the money to do it. Absent borrowing, which is an expensive way to do business, and there is more flexibility than we've experienced in the past. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Weed, for these comments and suggestions. Moving on to the next section of the presentation.
I'm going to jump in. I believe Mr. Kellier has a question for the public.
Well, it's more of a comment, or maybe it's a question. Yeah. Going back to page 24 out of 64, you've got pipe leaks by year. So, and you see that before 2005, leaks were averaging maybe 60 per year, a lot of times over 40 leaks per year. And then since then, it dropped to like 30 leaks a year, which is half of 60, and almost always around 40 or below for the last 15 years. So it becomes, the question becomes, question number one, why has the last 15 years been so wonderful, or less leaks than before? And number two, it seems like there's very few leaks, like 25, 30 leaks a year. Maybe there's actually 30,000 leaks a year, but you're not counting little drips. How do you define a leak? Maybe this only counts the real leaks, and you're not counting all the tiny little leaks that don't really matter. I've heard, also in question number three, what percentage of your water leaks out of the pipes? I've heard it's a surprisingly high percentage across America. I'm wondering what your guess is for your leakage. Thanks.
Okay, well, maybe I could just quickly repeat what Ms. Ipagunta said about this particular chart and the data prior to 2005. At that time, we had an active service line replacement program. So we were out working on these pipes and disturbing service lines and disturbing mains and causing our own, havoc in the process of improving our system. And so a lot of that resulted from some work that we were doing ourselves. With regard to the percentage of leaks in our distribution system, we do a pretty comprehensive water audit annually, trying to take a look at where all the water that we can measure, where it goes. Obviously, we don't have a way to perfectly characterize where water may be leaking within the system when we don't see it leaking. But I think, as I recall, our overall portion of unaccounted for water that's attributable to potential leaks in the system is around a little less than 6%. So I think we fare fairly well relative to lots of other water systems in that regard. And so hopefully those addressed your questions.
Okay. John Weed, the service line replacement program, I'd encourage you to go back and scrub your data and see if those were service line failures that we counted as leaks. And what I recall in that experience was the board was talked into hiring permanently as staff, 4 people for a crew and water ops, and immediately the workload dropped almost nothing following that hire. So it was, I've always felt that was a bit curious.
Director Gunther here. I don't remember those same statistics, Director Weed, and I think operations would have to be here to comment on that. But I think there's some issues there.
Yeah, I can comment on that. We did staff up with an extra crew or two. It was before my time as general manager to proactively address service line failures that we were experiencing with polybutylene service lines. I think what happened is we sort of got ahead of it a little bit, and we certainly have enough work to keep our utility workers busy. And they've been repurposed, and we've been much better at doing our water main flushing or cleaning program. We've done a better job doing our valve exercising. And when we have those big issues, it's been really, really helpful to have utility workers that are able to deal with it. But everybody is busy, and if we benchmark the number of utility workers that we have with other agencies, I am pretty certain that we will show up fine in terms of the number of resources we have for our size agency. I think it's very appropriate. With that, I would suggest that we go back to the presentation and power through the last 15 slides or so, and then open it up for Q&A again.
Hey, I just want to share something with the audience. There's somebody with some music or audio equipment that is disturbing the entire conversation here.
Issue resolved. So Ed, Reka, can we kind of continue where we were leaving off? If that's okay, President Akbari?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So this is the last section of the presentation. These are our overall objectives. The objectives remain same. And our strategy and our approach is slightly modified. So that's what we'll go through in the next few slides. Just touching on these high-level objectives. The main objective is to stay ahead of our failure curve and maximize the economic life of our existing water mains. So the approach that we'll be going through in the next few slides is adjust our ramp-up rate to keep our leak repairs at a manageable level, considering our historic highs. And then again, focusing on those mains that are nearing the end of useful life. So this is a slide that illustrates the ramp-up approach going forward. And it just gives a little background to understand what's going on this slide. The red line here, we have red, green, and orange bars. So the red is the projected leaks, and the projected leaks on this chart were calculated using exponents model. They have provided a formula for predicting future normalized leaks. So using that model, so we have projected the leaks in the next few decades. And then the green line represents the projected leaks with ramp up, while we simultaneously ramp up our main pipeline renewals, how the leak rate would change along with ramp ups. And then the orange bars indicate our actual ramp up schedule in miles per year. For example, 2030, we are looking at replacing 4 miles per year, a little less than 4 miles per year. So that's how we read these slides here, just to give you that background. And some of the key takeaways here, just to bring everyone on the same page. So to reevaluate, we actually used, as I mentioned, proper rate at which we accelerate the main renewal program. So we used our 2009 actual assessment on our system. So this is a multi-decade program. So we are still in the initial stages at the beginning of this implementation of this program. So considering our overall objectives, the ramp-up approach that we are proposing here shows the replacement rate relative to the leaks that we expect to experience in future. So the approach also shows that our number of repairs in future will remain at a manageable level. If you remember from the earlier slide, the max that we have seen since 1977 was close to 100 leaks per year. So going with this ramp-up approach, we're going to keep our number of leaks less than the 150. So that's still manageable. And then we'll continue to ramp up our program to get to 1%, and then eventually to 2% as we get closer to the end of the useful life.
Hi, Rekha, this is Paul. Could I invite you back in the year 2075 to say we were right way back then?
Probably somewhere in heaven.
You are giving a gift to future engineering teams, whether you realize it or not.
Actually, I might ask a question here. So Director Sethi kind of touched on this earlier. I don't know quite how to ask this question, but there's a near statistical certainty that in the next 10, 15 years, we're going to have major seismic activity. How much of this analysis would even be useful at that point? If we're seeing a major earthquake, would we not then just have to start over here? I mean, how did you factor that into the analysis?
So this particular analysis was not really focusing on seismic vulnerabilities. This is related to replacing or renewing our old pipe with new pipe. But the program also includes seismic improvements to our projects or to the main renewals. So actually, we didn't focus too much on the seismic aspect of the pipeline renewals, and the presented approach is to sustain the renewal rate and make sure we are able to get through the entire the renewal of our AC pipes before we experience major number of leaks or failures under normal circumstances because of aging pipeline and the other factors impacting the repairs. However, if there is a seismic event, the number of leaks, the number of failures, that's a different analysis. The number of repairs that would be necessary after a seismic event is going to be exponentially higher than what we are seeing on this slide, because this didn't incorporate a seismic event.
Yeah, and I'll just quickly add that what you're seeing on the left y-axis here is the number of miles of pipe. But remember, we didn't spend a lot of time on it, but there's this prioritization process and it's risk-based. And part of the assessment of the risk of every single segment of the pipe factors in seismic risk. So if there was a major seismic event, we know we're going to lose a lot of water mains. But part of the program involves assessing the risk and prioritizing based upon risk. And so that includes seismic. So this is, although this chart isn't focused on seismic, then the selection of the individual mains to be renewed are always considering seismic risk.
That is correct. Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. So to summarize what we are seeing on this slide, this justifies a ramp-up approach to maximize the service life or the economic value of the pipeline by minimizing our maintenance costs. And then also it will give us time in the next few years to leverage industry advancement in the renewal technology. And then with this model, our ACP pipes will be renewed 10 years earlier than the prior model that was presented earlier based on our previous board presentations. So this is a tentative capital expenditure slide considering the projects that we have already identified, the projects that staff is currently working on. Over the next 10 years, we are looking at replacing nearly 24 to 25 miles of pipeline. And the focus would be both the pipelines that are at high risk based on our risk profile that again incorporates the seismic factors, likelihood of failure and consequence of failure. In addition to that, we'll also focus on some of the pipelines that are in poor condition. If you remember from earlier slide, we have about 7% of our system has experienced leaks, and 0.7% is in poor condition, which is about 6 miles of pipeline. So in the next few years, in our short-term plan, we'll focus on those pipes that are in poor condition, as well as the pipes, the selected pipes based on our risk profile. So that would be the focus in the next 10 years. And we are looking at nearly 24 miles of pipeline with a capital expected expenditure of $144 million. And this is it.
Director Sethi here. You're talking basically about 2.5 miles a year over the next 10 years. And I just want to point out, this is well off the mark of what this board unanimously supported in the past, which was 5 to 10 miles per year of pipeline renewal. So we're way off base from the commitments that were made 10 years ago that were not met by engineering. And again, we're piling up tens of millions of dollars in our reserve accounts right now because we set our rates to be able to do a certain amount of pipeline renewal. I think that the entire engineering team needs to take a good, wholesome look at what prior obligations were. Maybe this is the best you can do now, but this is well off what we committed to our customers on and how we set our rates. And I don't want to sound like I'm angry at you personally. It's just that you weren't part of prior management teams going back 10 years. But this is the contrast that I draw, that we are well off our commitments to our customers that we have made in past years as a board. All of us are responsible here. All board members, all senior staff.
Yeah, thank you, Director Sethi, and we definitely hear you. And our objective is to definitely increase this, the output of the program, but in a responsible way. And so we will be back with more about specifics, but this is our snapshot based upon where we are today.
John Weed, if I might briefly. I agree with Director Sethi. We're looking at a 10-year reset on this program from where we were. One of the issues that came up is we put other projects in priority over the infrastructure, with fish ladders, AMI, ultrafiltration, which really chewed up our program's engineering staff for those periods of time. And this got delayed. But this makes a strong argument for moving $15 million a year from our commodity rates to our fixed charge rates so we can fund this project. Thank you.
Okay, we do appreciate the input from all of the directors. Just want to get to the end and then hear the other directors input to staff about what we presented and what adjustments you feel we should make in the program and other things you think that staff should consider. So this is all good.
Thank you. The next slide is a intermediate term look of our program. Again, as I mentioned, this is a multi-decade program. So what it would take and where would we be by end of 2050. Again, this is a preliminary overview of the program with preliminary budgets, and we'll need to revise this as we get closer to those years. And we expect that our efforts to optimize our contracting methods and changes to our design delivery approaches and piloting new material will result in lower unit costs and also give us more information in terms of how we want to adjust our ramp up rate going forward. The illustration that I have provided before is based on the information that we have today, and we'll continue to revise this information as we go. So finally, conclusions based on the data review and the analysis of our system. So planned approach of renewals and repairs will extend our investment appropriately. So it minimizes burden on ratepayers and maximize the utilization of our assets while keeping our leak repairs in a manageable state. So by 2050, most of the vulnerable pipes, about 186 miles of pipe will be renewed. By 2079, the entire ACP system will be renewed at the renewal rate that's identified in the earlier slide. Again, we'll continue to evaluate the best practices and leverage technology and innovation and adjust our program, adjust our replacement rate over time. And as we have new information on that, we'll be sharing that and adjusting that based on our program requirements. So the next couple of slides, I'll touch on our planned next steps. This is mostly the near-term next steps for the program. So the main goal here is to ramp up our average replacement rate from our current 0.1% to 0.5% in the next 10 years, and then target 1% replacement in the following 10 years. And increase our investments from 10 million per year average to 14 on average in the next 10 years. And again, this is already part of our financial planning model, and this would not have any major financial implications with these increases. And we'll look at piloting alternatives to improve our production rate, construction productivity, and also cost effectiveness by looking at different delivery approaches, construction approaches, and pipeline materials. We'll continue our current approach related to CEQA. Most of the pipeline renewals, if those are in-kind replacements or renewals, that would not induce increase the capacity of our supply. or induced growth, then those will be treated as typical replacements, in-kind replacements, and we'll go with categorical exemptions like we are already doing. And if the projects require increasing capacity for operational or other reasons, then we'll be considering initial study mitigation NECTEC in future, depending on a case-by-case basis. And then we'll update our asbestos cement pipe condition assessment. This type of condition analysis and life span prediction should be completed periodically as we get closer to the end of useful life. This is something that staff will be looking at, and then revisiting our prioritization model, recalibrating our model to add additional triggers that contributes to the failure of the pipes. That includes the material, geographic setting, history, and the construction methods implemented during the installation. So we'll continue to evaluate these innovations in pipeline renewal technologies. And we're also looking at grant programs and other funding opportunities to fund this program as we make progress on this. We'll again be adjusting our budgetary estimates as we ramp up the program and as we learn more about more information from our pilot projects. So we'll continue to provide status updates to the board and also the board committee. So with that, I would be happy to take any other questions.
Well, first of all, thank you, Ms. Ipagunta, for a great presentation today. I'm sure we have a lot of questions. I actually want to start with some of the directors we haven't heard from yet. Director Huang, do you want to offer some comments?
Sure. Actually, I would just start out by saying that I like this. I understand other directors might disagree, but I like the staff's approach using a risk-based prioritization process to identify the pipelines that needs to be replaced. I understand, and I definitely personally share the urge to replace the pipeline earlier as much as we can, because that usually end up equals better customer service and water supply, water delivery reliability. However, it just does not make sense to accelerate for the sake of accelerating a schedule. Replacing a pipeline with a 75 to 85-year lifespan every 50 years just does not make sense. That is not a good way to spend our taxpayers' money, to just throw away the rest of the useful life of a piece of equipment. So there has to be thought and way to prioritize. And to make matters worse, the way our community is developed is in bunches. I think one of the map that Ms. Ipagunta shared in her presentation, you could see that they are kind of clustered. So pipeline in the same age tend to have same type of failure based on construction, based on geology. So you can't just say, I'm going to replace 10 miles. Some years, maybe you only need to replace 2. Some years, maybe you need to replace 30, just because the location and when it was put in. So just having a number of miles replaced doesn't make sense to me. The replacement really should be based on a prioritization scheme. And I thought what our staff presented makes sense, and it's a good use of our ratepayers' money. I know there were a lot of discussion about delayed in implementation, the 3-year delay or suspension of this program. I know not all the directors were here when we make that decision, but you know what? We as the board make that decision. It's not the staff's fault. We chose rate stabilization over this program. We take the responsibility. In terms of seismic, I guess it's a little bit confusing because we actually have 2 parallel pipeline replacement programs. One is for seismic vulnerability and one is for main replacement. During the seismic discussion, we as the board made the decision to have a set of hierarchy that's different than these main replacement, regular main replacement programs. And if memory serves me right, we actually decided that for the areas that's subject to liquefaction, those will be our lowest priority areas because we want to make sure we focus on our dollars, our ratepayers' dollars, on making sure that we will protect our main transmission lines. So that, once again, it's our decision as a board. We make that decision. Whatever consequences, we eat it. I don't think it's fair to blame staff for not implementing those programs. And lastly, we gently at the end touch about funding, but I think in terms of funding, affordability, how we pay for this program, it will be a great discussion that would be more appropriate for another venue. I think we are trying to put too many different things in this particular workshop. I would say that's focused back on main renewal prioritization, and I really do agree with staff's approach. I'm sure we'll have a lot of discussion. And if we have a major seismic event, I am pretty sure Ms. Ipagunda's map chart and I wrote down page 50 something will totally have to be redone. We have to reassess because at that time, odds are we will have replaced a lot of different laterals and mains, and we'll just redraw a different chart at that time because it will be a reset for this district in terms of main replacement. So with that, I just want to say thank you. That's a great presentation. I really like the data presented. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Huang. Director Gunther, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we're lost sight of too is we are starting program, and yes, we did put it on hold for good reasons. And what we didn't put on hold, we've taken care of our crossings, our main crossings. And the pipeline projects we're working on right now are expensive. I don't know what the difference is going to be per mile from what we consider an average pipeline renewal, but they're expensive and they are very a great impact. The Alvarado Niles pipeline project is big. The Driscoll project is going to be big. I saw one a couple of years out from now on, I think it's the Mission Boulevard. That's going to be big. We've got several big ones out there. And big ones, they cost more money. They take longer. But the catch is we get more bang for the buck by replacing the Alvarado Niles pipeline than we would if we replaced my street, Dow Avenue, right off of Alvarado Niles. So I think we have to look at that. We have to look at when we look at what we're doing, and I don't want to back, Monday night quarterback what we did, but we're targeting, I think, where we need to target. I think we do need to target our seismic areas that could be affected, and I believe that's where the staff is heading. And Director Sethi is very right. We're going to get hit. We're going to get hit pretty soon. We're working on borrowed time. It'd be great if we can come up with some extra funding. There are some possibilities here. There seems to be a possible emphasis on some infrastructure funding. We might be able to tap into some of that. And through the seismic area, we already have the data. We know where we're going to have issues, and perhaps move up that, 1950 date or the 2050 date, which is really only 30 years away, which some people may say, well, that's a long time. Well, it's true, 30 years is a long time, but it will be here. And if we can nibble away at some of that, maybe we can make it 25 instead of 30 by making some moves in the future. And I think staff's looking at that. So I'm satisfied it's where we are. I'm satisfied with what we've chosen to do. I was on the board when we made a lot of those decisions, and I'm okay with my decisions. I disagree with Director Weed on many of his comments. This is a recorded meeting again, so I'm going to say that because I think it's necessary for me to say that, that there's not there's not consensus on some of those opinions. But this is not a rate structure meeting. This is a meeting regarding the pipe projects. I think we're going in the right direction. I think we're going to see some serious projects when we get Driscoll going and the second half of Ravarado Niles. I tell you, I'm living this project and the impact is significant. And the impact is going to be significant around Driscoll and around all of our major ones. We're talking very serious impact. It's worth the money, it's worth the time, and it's worth the impact. So I think we're doing okay.
I have some follow-up comments.
Yeah, Director Sethi, I was going to turn to you next.
Yeah, I have some follow-up comments. I just want to, I'm hearing some comments from board members that disturb me a little bit. It's like people are not recollecting what we really did as a board. So let's go back to 2016. We did not have a rate increase that year. We said we were going to stand back and take a look at all of our priorities and then come back through our rate hearings in 2016, leading up to the election, at which point Director Akbari was elected to the board. And then we went into a hell of a circumstance with the public when we were promoting a multi-year steep rate increases amounting to about 33%, 20% in the first year. And the reason we were convinced to do that was because the staff said, here are all the CIP projects and pipeline work that we're going to do. And we signed up as a board, all five of us, that we're going to do 5 to 10 miles per year of pipeline replacement, which we estimated at the cost at that point of $1 to $2 million a year. And now I'm hearing comments that say we put the program on hold. No, we never put it on hold. And meanwhile, we had a reserve account that was around $10 million that's inflated up to over $70 million now on our books because we haven't gotten the work done. That's really the story of our district the last 5 years. We've been collecting the money from our ratepayers, but we haven't met our commitment to the public. Now we're going from 5 to 10 miles a year, and suddenly we're saying, oh yeah, everything's hunky-dory now because we're going to do 2.5 miles a year over the next 10 years. That doesn't cut it in my opinion, because going back to even before I was on the board, back to 2008 when we did the seismic study, every board meeting has been talking about doing up to 10 miles a year of pipeline renewal. That just simply hasn't taken place. We've fallen well short of our goals. And meanwhile, our excess funds have really inflated well beyond what's imaginable back 5 years ago. And the reason those funds are building up is because we haven't gotten the work done that we promised our community. That's the bottom line. And so, yeah, I like the analysis. It looks good. 2.5 miles a year over the next 10 years. But it's severely insufficient compared to our prior commitments to the public.
Director Akbari, if I may, I think if we move to slide 53, you'll see that with a 30-year projection, if we don't just emphasize on the first 10 year, with a 30-year projection, we are replacing between 5 to 10 miles of pipeline per year if you divide 186 by 30. So I think part of the difference is the age and of our pipelines, the different type of pipeline, the geology, and the way our district is developed, the different communities developed. So some years you'll have more, some years you'll have less. But if you look at the long-term trend, they are within the benchmark. Thank you.
Director Wong, respectfully, you and I both signed up for the prior analyses presented to us by engineering, which were 5 to 10 miles a year. This goes back to well before I was even on the board. And so now we're signing up for a severe reduction, and you're saying everything's hunky-dory.
That's not what I'm saying.
Well, why did you sign up for the previous commitments then?
They are still within.
Why did we set our rates to accordingly bring in the revenue that was needed to do that pipeline replacement? And now we've got inflated accounts that are almost absurd. It's an embarrassment.
Okay. So I'm just going to say, yes, we have more money in our capital project than we should. There are good reasons for some of the delays. You only emphasize on the first 10 years of pipeline replacement. We as a district do not look at our capital project only 10 years out. If you look at the 30-year projection, they are within the benchmark of between 5 to 10 miles a year of replacement. There are other factors you need to consider. Well, I personally would consider, I will not tell you what to do because I do respect your opinion, that there are risk-based evaluation. Replacing 10 miles of pipeline for the sake of replacing 10 miles of pipeline does not make sense, especially when some of those pipelines still have useful life left. Rate is very important to me, and we're not going to talk about it, but it does come into how much we replace things.
Director Wong, I hear what you're saying. Where I differ, and I hope you respect my opinion here, is that we didn't put anything into some suspensory mode. We didn't put projects on hold. The fact is, the projects didn't get done. That's what happened. We never agreed as a board to put things on hold. They just didn't get done.
I seem to remember in the past years, we decided not to take a larger rate increase if we could delay some projects. And that includes the pipeline replacement project. Am I wrong?
Yes, I believe you are, seriously, because
Mr. Shaver?
when we had our rate hearings in February of 2017, the staff.
So obviously Director Weed is wrong also because he was the one who made the 3-year delay. Oh, nothing happened. So I would say.
I think John was making the same point I was, that the work didn't get done. But we went to our ratepayers in February 2017 and said, here's how much money we need to get these projects done over the next 4 years. And that's why we're imposing a 20% rate increase the first year and subsequent rate increases. And then the work didn't get done and the money is piled up into our reserve accounts.
Director Sassy, with all respect, I remember that conversation. I didn't like that rate increase at all. All right. However, that's not today's topic. We're talking about main replacement. That's focused on what they're proposing, not what you remember, I remember, or what you think was promised, or what I think is promised. That's focused on what staff is proposing. I understand you do not like what they're proposing.
I'll pull up the documents, Director Wong. We were making commitments to do 5 to 10 miles a year of main replacement.
And I am saying what they're proposing is still 5 to 10 years.
It didn't get done. And we collected the revenue from our ratepayers. That's the bottom line.
Director Sethi,
now we're sitting on all that money and we're earning interest on it in the stock market.
Folks, we're not sitting on the money. It's on the street, 2 blocks from my house. That's an expensive project. That cost a whole lot more than if we tried to do the main in front of my house. We are doing, and it's not a fraction.
It is.
It is a large, I think it's 17 million.
Yeah.
It's significant. It's significant delays, it's significant to traffic, and it's a significant project. And it's a very crucial project. We're doing it. I'm not disagreeing that we shouldn't try to maybe, if we can, see where we can get up to 10. It'd be great if we get up to 10 miles a year sooner. But I'm saying this, that the money we're spending right now, and the staff effort we're spending on Driscoll, on Alvarado Niles, is you can't do that and get 10 miles unless we bring in extra people and extra help, contractors that's in this program. Their staff is looking at it. So, you know, maybe there's ways to do it. I'm just saying, I don't want to hear this. I heard it in my election and it frustrated the heck out of me when I heard people saying, oh, we're not doing anything. And I couldn't drive on my street because of our project, our $17 million project that was being ignored. And the fact is, we are doing stuff and we're trying and we're progressing. And this is going to get really interesting in the next few years as we get up to 10 miles a day, because I'll tell you, it's disruptive.
All right.
Director Gunther, I'm in agreement with you on those large projects that you're talking about. I know where the money's being spent. I was differing with my colleagues here on the board by saying that we postponed or suspended projects and now we're trying to catch up. No, we didn't. I put the blame on the staff here. I'm sorry, but the work we put our butts on the line to collect additional rate revenue with a severe rate increase, and then our district didn't get the work done. I put the responsibility on all of us as directors that we made a commitment to the public and we didn't deliver on it. That's all I'm saying. Now, yes, we've got a stockpile of money and we're trying to whittle it down on these big projects. And so I concur with you. Yeah, these are big projects. We're spending the money down, but I'm just looking back retrospectively over the last 5 years and saying, you can't just all of a sudden make this reassessment that we're going to do 2.5 miles a year from when for every year for a decade, this board was making commitments to do 5 to 10 miles a year.
Director Stefan,
We set our rates accordingly.
I appreciate what you're saying. And the thing is, the project out there, and I'm sorry I get emotional because I went through this in my last election as well. And it was very frustrating. That project just didn't happen. It took several years of planning, and it doesn't get completed and listed as completed until it's done, and it's not done. And, you know, I saw a time of May, and quite honestly, I'll be a little bit surprised. I'll be thrilled if it's done by May. There's a lot of work still going on out there. And it's not because the contractor's not working. Believe me, he is. That contractor's working every day. And, you know, we could have sped it up a little bit by working at night, maybe, and weekends, and really made my life miserable. But I didn't even get to vote on this one. And I would have voted to spend that money because
you know what? I know where our money is in our reserve accounts. I know how it's planned to be spent, so I have confidence there. But if I look at it really objectively, and I'm sorry if the staff has to hear this, I say that the staff overestimated their capabilities 5 years ago and under-delivered. And I don't want that to continue down the road. That's why I'm bringing this up, so that we actually meet the obligations that we make to the community as a board and as a senior management team.
If I might give another opinion. This is fundamentally the same project we looked at over 10 years ago, which was going to be, and the unit cost have tripled in 10 years from what we were previously presented. The reasons we didn't execute was primarily because of a funding issues which were related to our rate structure. We did go in for a major rate increase following a rate holiday and a drought where we were leveraged down and we saw a huge drop off in our revenues. That had nothing to do with our planning and where the money was going to go and what our promises were. We were responding to a very unstable rate structure, which we still have. So we're looking at $1 billion 30-year project And when you approach a $1 billion 30-year project, you have to establish some parameters and some discipline to spend money every year and commit it to it. And ideally, you identify a revenue source for that, which is based on fixed charges, not revenue charges, commodity charges.
I'd like to remind Director Wee, this isn't the finance meeting, so we really can't get into this too much in detail, other than I'm going to disagree.
Well, if I could just jump in, I think it's helpful for us to understand that you guys are very much invested and engaged in this too, because this is definitely important to staff, and it's helpful for us to hear how much you guys are invested in this too. One of the, we are looking forward in this presentation, and we might need to do some more work looking backward in the future, but at this point, we're looking forward. And one of the things we want to do is share where we're headed and make sure that you understand that and capture any concerns. What you're looking at here is, looking at staff's plan to take some risk, to try some new things. We might fail. They may be costly. Well, they will be, of course, they will be costly. But in an effort to go where we need to go in this program over time, we're looking at certainly evaluating and potentially making some significant changes in how we do things. And so, the board may see coming up some large contracts similar to what Director Sethi had described previously, where you're contracting a good deal of work under one contract, perhaps over a period of time, and different types of contracting methodologies, different resource mix involved. We feel that we're going to have to thoroughly vet and try some of those out to see what works best for our system going forward. And so, so to the extent there are concerns, we want to certainly hear about that. What I'm hearing so far is there is certainly interest in ramping up the program, and that's what we intend to do.
So, well, first of all, I appreciate everyone sharing their comments. Let me first, before I offer my comments, ask staff, what specific board direction are you looking for tonight? And have you received what you need from the directors so far?
Yeah, we're not looking for any formal action. We just simply wanted to share what we knew at this time. Also give you a heads up in terms of what types of numbers have gone and will go into the capital improvement program, and also understand your perspectives. And so I think we've checked those boxes.
Okay. Can we move to the slide that lays out over the next 30 years the anticipated cost? There it is. Yeah. So one question I have, and I don't know if maybe I'll pose this to Rekha. Let's say we took out the constraints of budget and other resources, labor, I guess. Would there be projects that would fit within the risk profile that you've laid out that we could pull into the first decade, 2021 to 2030, that would otherwise fall outside of that time range?
If I understood your question correctly, in the first decade, 21 to 2030, the pipelines that we have identified are based on our risk profile, and also would include some of the projects that are based on the condition of the pipelines condition analysis.
Would there be ones that right now, because of a budget constraint or a engineering resources constraint, has been pushed into 2031 to 2040, but should be prioritized sooner if we had the money?
Yes, we know that the resources would have to be ramped up in future, but when we put this plan together, this didn't include resource constraints as such. this is based on what we need to do so that we are not going with a premature replacement of pipelines before they reach the end of their useful life, and then focus on the ones that are necessary to focus now. So that's the main criteria that we have used when we put this plan together. And it didn't really influence the resource constraints, have not completely influenced this, the proposal here.
So I guess that's where I'm having some confusion here, right? Because what we've laid out is that each year we have to replace 5 to 10 miles of pipeline on average. Over the next 10 years, though, we're saying that, oh, we only have 24 miles that need to be replaced. Do you kind of see why I'm having some issues understanding that? Do we not have 50 to 100 miles that need to be replaced in the next decade?
Correct. So the 5 to 10 miles per year was based on the previous analysis and based on the projected number of repairs and remaining useful life. So that's why we revisited the data. And then based on the recent information that's available, looking at our recorded leaks, and then also looking at the projections made back in 2009 versus what we are actually seeing. So we observed that there is the remaining useful life has shifted in our favor, and replacement of a pipeline would cost anywhere between $5 to $6 million per mile if you are talking about a simple small diameter main. But if you are looking at a complex project like Alvarado Niles, that's going to be much more expensive than that. But just putting that in perspective, if we have to repair a main, we would be spending anywhere between $10,000 to $80,000, depending on the type of repair that we would be doing. So it makes total sense to rely on some on repairs for those low risk mains, and then invest our dollars in a right way so that we are not prematurely overspending on the program. But when it comes to 2031, that's when it makes sense to get to a ramped up rate of 0.5% or so that we can address some of those mains that are in that age group where it's important to replace.
I'd like to chime in real quick, if I don't mind, Aziz. I have a concern, actually, and this kind of focuses back on the comments from Director Sethi, is that I understand what you're saying, but we are way overdue on an earthquake. And I think it might be the valuable investment to move some of those projects up, even though in areas where we have identified possible seismic issues, if we can move those up, because these are, that starts to override the cost of just deterioration. And I don't know if that's factored into this or not, but the earthquake is way overdue. And if we can move some stuff up by 5 years, that might be of a benefit. Just throwing that out there.
Director Gunther, I think you saw where I was kind of going with my line of questioning, but that's exactly it. I mean, I think I'm in agreement with a lot of comments that Director Sethi made, that, in this case, it would make more sense for us, in my opinion, for us to front load some of the expense. And I'm concerned that we're going to see major seismic activity in the next 10 to 15 years, and we're going to be in a position where we're going to wish that we had ramped up our schedule and that we had invested more in some of these renewals and replacements. And it's going to cost us far more after the fact because we didn't. Also, I think our ramp up schedule, we know that at best we get about 75 years of useful life. Even ramping up to a 0.5% or 1% is not going to be enough for us to keep up with the actual useful life of the mains that we have. And so we're going to need to ramp up much faster than that, in my opinion. And so that's kind of the perspective I have, we talked a little bit about funding. I'm not going to get too much into that, but I do think we have ample opportunity for us to front load some of this. I would be in favor of us bringing on additional outside resources to do so, but I think there are a lot of projects that are overdue. And in the next 10 years, I can imagine we're going to need more than just 24 out of 900 miles needing replacement. On top of that, the more projects we can combine, I think we've talked about this at multiple meetings, but moving to more of the design build or a master contract, I think makes a lot of sense because we'll be able to realize a lot of cost savings that way too. So those are my comments so far. I don't know if you need more, Rekha or Ed.
Aziz, I have a final
Yeah, go ahead, Jared.
input here. It's tangentially related, and this is probably better off in a rates discussion, but it does tie in here, I think, very well. I've always been impressed with East Bay Mud. If you take a look at any of their detailed bills, you can go to their website. What I've always liked is that they've had a line item since 1995 specifically for their seismic improvement program and main renewal program. And at least from what I gather from their directors, they have now completed nearly 100% of their pipeline replacement on the large diameter and smaller diameter pipes across the Hayward Fault. They're in a similar situation as we are. And they responsibly report back to their ratepayers. This is the charge on your bill that goes for that infrastructure renewal, replacement, seismic upgrade, and they account for all the dollars that are then spent. It's an auditable way of reporting back to your ratepayers. Here's what the cost was, here's how much we collected from you, here's the line item on your bill. And it goes back to what Director Weed is talking about, that we need to better reflect the fixed costs of running the district on our water bill. And this is one way of responsibly doing it. So I'm just going to throw out the idea. When we get to rates, we can talk about it more. But I really like that the way that East Bay Mud handles it. And in our financials, it's kind of muddy. You can't figure out where the money's going and for what purpose it's being spent. And I think when I see a line item on my bill that says this is what I'm paying for, I really like that. And it's not going for the commodity charge. Here's specifically what it goes for. So I just want to throw out the idea. We can talk about it more later on. I'm not saying I advocate doing that right now, but I sure like the idea. I think it's worth taking a closer look at.
Dr. Akbari, if I may.
Yes, Director.
First of all, I will say I actually like Director Seppi's idea with a separate line item, but we could have that discussion when it's appropriate. But I do have a question for staff. So realistically, is it possible to replace a pipeline to withstand liquefaction at a reasonable cost? What I'm trying to get at is we seems to be implying that by replacing the old pipelines, we could suddenly withstand earthquake. I think it would make us less vulnerable, but there will still be a lot of failures even with a new pipeline. That's my understanding. Is that correct?
That is right. There's no such thing as 100% seismic proof. There are systems we can put into place that will really increase the resiliency, but there's no such thing as 100%. Yes, if we had all new pipes today and we had the 7.1 on the Hayward Fault, we would have lots of leaks and breaks.
So I guess what I'm trying to get at is that there's a cost associated with accelerating these projects. And I will agree that I will first say that we looked at it when we were talking about seismic vulnerability. That's why we made that decision. But the other directors are correct. The finance picture has changed quite a bit. Pipelines are a lot more expensive. We know a bit more about our pipeline. Perhaps I know in your evaluation, you did put in consideration for seismic, but perhaps it's time to take a look at it again to see with a more updated understanding of the system, is there such thing as a reasonable replacement? I will be the first one to say that I live in the liquefaction zone. I would love to be able to know that after a major earthquake, my house will still be here and there will be water service to fight any fire that comes from it. But I also understand there's a cost associated with it, and that's something we need to look at.
Yeah, agreed. And I'll just mention, we really didn't, and you guys are correctly pointing out, we didn't really focus a lot on the seismic elements of the overall program here. We're really mostly focusing on simple main renewal just as a result of degradation and age. Most of the projects that we've done to date have been to deal with seismic risk, right? So Alvarado Niles is nearly purely, it's seismic and capacity. Driscoll's capacity was some seismic. Our Appian tank project and the inlet outlet pipeline there, seismic, and the other seismic improvements we've made. We've been mostly focusing on seismic improvements to date. We know we have to shift a good deal of attention toward simple renewal. Now, even simple renewal has seismic elements, right? We understand the seismic setting that we're designing in, and so we always try and maximize resiliency. But you're right, we did not call out a lot of the seismic work and the focus that's been on seismic in the past. I will say one of the things that we did when we added the small diameter main renewal sort of sub-program or segment to all this was because we recognized that we were spending a lot of time and resources on purely seismic projects because of the seismic risk involved that trumped all of the other, many of the other risk factors in our renewal program. And so we knew we had to inject small diameter renewal as part of the program and get going and get these small diameter ACP mains replaced. So that's why we have that program. So we're really doing both. I don't want to give the impression that we're ignoring seismic, because that's certainly not the case.
John Weed, the thought comes to mind that in your laying out your program, that engineering is a major timeline element. Following an earthquake, there'll be a lot of money there to restore and replace systems if you can do it in a timely manner. And possibly what we should be looking at is emphasizing the engineering and planning elements, the stockpiling of the materials, as a priority over and your objectives, as opposed to completing so many miles of pipeline. But be ready then, if you either get a large bond issue that comes through, that you can go back in and do a slug of work at one time, or alternately, if we have an emergency, the federal government comes in and authorizes you and pays you to replace entire systems that have been destroyed through liquefaction or other problems. AC pipe is notoriously brittle, and one might well be able to make an argument that whole sections of our system have to be replaced in their entirety. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Weed. I want to open it up to our audience as well, see if there's any questions from members of the public. Hearing or seeing none, let me take it back to the board. Are there any final questions or oh, looks like Mr. Abreu.
Thank you very much. So I just ran the numbers on that chart for how many miles. If you're looking at miles, it's the first 5 years, 1.7 miles a year, 1.7, not 2.5. Then the next 5 years, 3. The next 5 years, 4.5. The next 25 years, whatever, 9, and then the last one, 19. But when you get out into the decades from now, that's fantasy land. So really, we're talking about 1.7 or 3 miles a year, and if that's the metric that we're going to be shooting for, if it's if we're supposed to be doing 5 or 10, we're actually doing 1.7 or 3. Big difference. But I'd question, if you've got the money, you took the money, you were supposed to be building pipes, and you're not building pipes, what are you going to do with the money? I think that's what Director Sethi was asking. What do you want to do with the money now? Now that thanks.
Thank you for your comment. I see we have the Director of Finance on the line. John, do you want to comment just on that question?
Yeah, so whenever we go through a rates process with the board, what we do is we factor our current reserves into that, right? So kind of the larger reserves that we have, the less near-term rate increase we're likely to propose. And so that's how that type of thing would get adjusted. So we do have additional reserves today. I think more than we may have planned on having today when we initially did rate increases. But that money is still going to get spent in the coming years as these projects move from design and into construction. And what will happen then is, the next few years, we may have lower rate increases than we otherwise would have had.
Thank you, Mr. Wunderlich. Mr. Abreu, did that answer your question? Do you have any follow-ups?
Well, I think that the directors are going to follow up, and I think they're very capable of following up. So I have nothing more to add.
Okay, thank you. All right. I'm not hearing any more questions or comments from the board or from members of the public.
Aziz?
Yes, Director Gunther.
Yeah, I just wanted to make one comment regarding what Director Sethi said about the bill. I know this is not the finance thing, but I think there's quite a bit of support for that, and possibly support for even identifying what we've spent if we want to go with seismic separate as well. So I'll look forward to that conversation in a future date.
Thank you, Director Gunther. I'm going to turn it back to staff. I'm not sure if I should turn it back to Mr. Stevenson or Ms. Ipagunta. I don't know if we have additional slides to go through.
I think the only slide you've missed is the thank you slide.
All right. Wonderful. So I think that completes this item. Is that correct?
Yeah, we don't have anything more to share. And if there are
yeah, thank you. I know that our engineering team really wanted to receive feedback, and boy, did they receive feedback today. Also, I wanted to offer the directors, there was a lot of discussion today amongst you about historical actions that have been taken by the district or facts and things like that. And I'm open to discussing that, because I think there were elements that were true that everybody raised, but that historical context I can weave together for the whole board so that at least you're looking at the same history as you determine the future that the district is going to be in. So I'm just offering that. We don't have to do it in this board meeting. We'll go to the closed session, but like I said, there are elements that were expressed that can all be weaved together.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Shaver. With that, we will conclude item number 4 on tonight's agenda and move on to item number 5, general managers reports. Are there any general managers reports?
None this evening, unless any staff has anything newsworthy that is breaking now that I'm not aware of. Okay, no general manager report items then. Thank you.
Great. Let us move on to item number 6, director's comments and/or agenda item requests. I'll open it up to the board.
None from me except for a short break before we go into closed session.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Hearing nothing else, I just want to express my appreciation for staff, particularly Ms. Ipagunta and Mr. Stevenson for tonight's presentation. We had a lot of discussion, but we're always appreciative of the work that staff puts in. And thank you for standing in the line of fire, Reka. We will then move on to item number 7, closed session. And I will try and read us into closed session. Item 7.1, pursuant to California Government Code, Section 54956.8, conference with real property negotiators. The property is the N3 Cattle Company, consisting of 131 parcels and approximately 50,535 acres in Alameda County, Santa Clara County, San Joaquin County, and Stanislaus County. Assessor's parcel numbers were furnished by the owner's representative and are attached to the agenda. The agency negotiators are Robert Shaver and Ed Stevenson, and the negotiating parties are the N3 Cattle Company, LLC, Wren Jr. and Wren Jr. Trust. Under negotiation are the price and terms of payment. And with that, we'll move into closed session and then we'll take a short break.
Okay, I'll move everyone into the closed session that is going to be in there.
Mr. Warren, just 1 second. There will be one other person joining us shortly, David Longinati.
Sure.
When he joins in, can you please add him to the closed session? He's one of my colleagues at
Oh,
ANSWER.
Mr. Miyake, you got it.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Hey, Andy, are we supposed to leave meeting or wait till you have us join?
Andy, you're on mute.
Sorry, I just caught that. I believe you once I open the room, you click on join and it will take you right to it. So I'm clicking on, I haven't got to your name yet. There you go. So now you are ready to go. Okay. Do you see the join?
All right, Andy, good job.
Now.
Wonderful. All right, it is 7:54 p.m. We have just convened into open session. We've concluded item 7.1. Pursuant to California Government Code, Section 54956.8, conference with real property negotiators. Property is the N3 Cattle Company, consisting of 131 parcels and approximately 50,535 acres in Alameda County, Santa Clara County, San Joaquin County, and Stanislaus County. Assessor's parcel numbers were furnished by the owner's representative and are attached to the agenda. The agency negotiators are Robert Shaver and Ed Stevenson, and the negotiating parties are the N3 Cattle Company, LLC, Wren Jr. and Wren Jr. Trust. Under negotiation are the price and terms of payment, and the board provided direction to our agency negotiators. With that, that concludes item 7.1. And we will adjourn our meeting tonight at 7:55 p.m. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.